is Off Script with Trish Glose, intimate interviews and conversations with interesting people. And in front of my mic today is Mr. Garth Harrington. Hello, sir.
Good morning. I'm feeling intimate.
This is very intimate, isn't
It is. It's cozy.
It is very cozy.
I did not bring my scotch. Well, it's early.
Dang it. It's never too early for a nice scotch. We'll talk about scotch
My kind
later.
of woman.
So you're officially, your title these days is retired.
Yes, it is. And as Rosemary likes to point out, I'm not sure how we have any time for work.
I agree. I mean, you two are always busy. And for those who are listening and watching, you are married to the lovely Rosemary Harrington.
I am indeed. 35 years, and the training is almost complete.
Nice. She always says, he's so cute. That's what she always says about you. All right. We are going to talk a lot about being retired and scotch and maybe a little bit of Rosemary as well. Where are you from originally?
San Francisco.
San Francisco, California.
Which
Born?
has fallen on hard times, I must say.
Yeah. How long did you live there?
Actually, through college, accepting my military service, about 26 years.
Wow. Do you consider that home?
Not anymore. Mm-hmm. No, I've come to be sadly a little ashamed of the city. When I grew up, it was a great cosmopolitan melting pot where everybody honored each other and respected each other. And just as an example, the town was so fantastic that my mother never owned a car until she was like 50, 55 years old. She commuted halfway across town to the Conservatory of Music and used the bus system. There was you could catch a streetcar or a bus and go within a block of where you wanted to go in that town.
Amazing.
Now you don't dare get on one.
So, right. And this was you, I mean, you grew up there. You were a kid in San Francisco.
Yes.
When was this? Like, what decade are we
Well,
talking?
I was born in 1940. I don't know, it was through the snow and the sled and the sleet. And went to two Catholic grammar schools, St. Dominic's and St. Vincent de Paul. One was a 5-block walk, one was a 3-block walk. And it was a very cosmopolitan town, but at the same time was very, very intimate. Mm-hmm. I had the privilege, we grew up in very humble surroundings. I love to tell the story of when my mother and father decided to go their separate ways. She had to find a place to live. But she wanted to live in a good neighborhood. Well, of course. She wasn't making a lot of money, and my father wasn't giving us a lot of money. And so how are you going to live in a really nice neighborhood without a lot of money?
Right.
Well, Mother was one of those engineers in life. She could just kind of make things happen. Mm. And
that's my kind of woman.
Oh.
Make things happen.
And she could make you make things happen.
I like that.
But she was browsing the paper, the San Francisco Chronicle, I imagine, and she sees this mansion for sale. Now, why she was looking under mansions, I have no idea. But beside the mansion, at the corner of Pacific and Steiner Street, was a little tiny home that appeared to be almost on stilts. You walked in under it and then wound around a staircase and got to the top floor. This was the Japanese servants' quarters for the mansion on the corner.
Okay.
And my father, being of multiple skills, but once again not having as much money, came in and remodeled the place for us, and we had it. But it was for short people. I mean, it had a peaked roof, but the side walls were about 3.5 feet high.
Oh, my goodness.
So you walk down the center of the room, and when you go to the side of the room, you kind of crooked over just a little bit, and you were okay.
What did your mom do for a living?
She was a professional concert pianist, eloquently trained first by the nuns in Canada, and then eventually by the finest of musicians, Lyle Guston, who was a legendary keyboard pianist, a Leschetizky advocate, and for those who understand keyboards, he was the maestro.
Nice.
And she grew up determined that eventually that she did not have that rock-hard temperament which you must have if you're going to be a solo concert performer. You've got to be able to do it. You make a mistake. She could not handle making mistakes.
Ooh.
And when you make a mistake in the middle of a performance, you bore on,
Right.
and she just had an incredibly difficult time mastering that. She's an incredibly humble woman. So this just was she had her own sense of pride, but it didn't carry over into nobody saw that, I'll just go on.
Right. Did you have siblings growing up?
I did not.
Okay.
I was a lonely
you were only child.
Yeah.
Were you allowed to make mistakes as a
Oh, yes.
as a
yes.
kiddo?
Oh, absolutely. No, and I made plenty of them. And my father was also a professional musician at the time that they met. He was an Irish tenor who was a nightclub entertainer and a fully certified rascal, I might say.
Nice.
He met my mother, picture of dignity. Somehow, I don't know how this happened. They got married. They were performing individually. Mother was an accompanist at the old KFRC radio stations, the Don Lee Broadcasting Network of the West Coast, which goes back to, was before the Ark landed, I think. But at any rate, he was a singer, and of course he needed an accompanist, and so she was the studio accompanist. That's how she would make money in those days. She was teaching. She was affiliated with various musicians around San Francisco. Eventually evolved to become a professor of music at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music in its very salad days, when it was in a group of 2 or 3 little buildings on Sacramento Street, just west of Presidio, for those of you in San Francisco. These were little cottages. Ada Clement and Lillian Hodgehead founded the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, which now, of course, is downtown in San Francisco, has huge facilities, has just grown beyond anything you could imagine.
Do you get a little sad when you go back and visit the city?
The city is very distressing now. I mean, this latest episode with the city is now retained the services of a poop patrol. I don't know whether you've read this or not.
I don't. Well, keep going.
I don't want to.
Okay, don't.
It's disgusting.
Okay, we won't go there. But you growing up in San Francisco, you left. You said when you joined the Army.
Yes.
Okay, so that was after high school, I'm assuming?
I did. I did a little internship of labor down in L.A. just to kind of see if I was halfway an adult. Stayed at a little hotel down there and worked. I got a job through a friend of a friend in a carpet warehouse, which was pretty comical because I weighed about 120 pounds and I was 5'10", and I'm with these guys busting carpets, laboring all over the city, delivering these huge rolls of carpet. And this one guy, he says, "Oh, don't worry, you can buck for me." I said, "Okay." So he says, "Okay, just untie this one roll of carpet that we had. They were in various rolls in the longitudinally stacked on this flatbed."
Okay.
And so we'd roll up to this loading dock, and this guy was a madman. And he'd whip around, face the back end into the loading dock, which is about 6 inches higher than lower than the bed of the truck. Back the truck up at about 15 miles an hour, dynamite the brakes, and the roll would fly off. He'd go sign the paper, and we'd go deliver the next roll.
Wow.
I said, "This is easy."
What made you want to join the Army?
Oh, those were in the days of mandatory service, the draft.
So you had to.
Well, you had a choice of 2 years draft or 3 years voluntary, and if you volunteered, you sort of got to pick your MOS, which is military occupational skill. So I wanted to go in the Signal Corps because I thought that would be dry. I thought you wouldn't be in the mud and all that sort of stuff. And wrong.
Yeah, you went to Korea.
I did. Charming place.
How long were you there?
Just over a year.
Okay.
Which was just fine.
All right.
That's just all you want to know. There were hairy experiences over there. I'll just put it this way. We were supposed to be in a ceasefire zone. And not all the players got the word.
Okay.
So
noted. You were also a singer with the Army Choir?
Yes, it was. When I determined I was not going to make a career out of the Army, which wasn't too hard to figure out once you got in.
Okay.
I hunted around for ways to make my stay most pleasant. I wound up being an infantry instructor, if you can imagine such a thing. at Fort Carson, Colorado during the Brandenburg Gate crisis back in 1961. And we'd go into town at night, and go to a bar. What else do you do?
Right.
And so I'm meeting these guys, and I was just sort of halfway singing along with these guys. They were all drinking and yelling and screaming. There was this quartet up on the bandstand, and it turned out the quartet was part of a entertainment troupe in the Army, but at night they made extra money by playing music. And I'm sitting with this one guy, Bill Powell, and he says, "You got a good voice." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "A couple of beers, I can do anything." And he says, No. He says, "You got a good voice. You got to join our group." And I said, "What group?" And he says, "The Army Air Defense Command Choral Group," which certainly gets the award for the longest title for a choral group.
That's a long title.
And we were part of NORAD, the North American Air Defense Command.
Okay.
Well, this led to, I walked down. They were out of town. They were on a bus.
Okay.
Touring as they were. Their mission, our mission as I became a member of the group, was to entertain the troops who manned the Nike sites. I don't know, these were not athletic places. These were Nike missiles.
Okay.
These were Air Defense Command missiles along the periphery of the country designed to shoot down missiles and airplanes and anything else which are coming into the country. By their very nature, they're very isolated, and therefore, and troops were in there for the duration. They didn't get to go to town, to the bar.
So you were performing for them.
So we were performing for them, and so we had about a 40-voice choir, which you wouldn't think would be all that entertaining, but we devised a fairly creative menu of entertainment. And I got, as I say, hired into the group. And the next thing I knew, the guy who was playing bass for the quartet in the group retired. And so they said, "Harrington, you have a musical background." I said, "Well, doesn't everybody here?" And he says, "Not so much." So at any rate, they stuck a bass in my hand and said, "You get to sleep after you practice bass each night." So I would go in the bathroom without the amplifier, because it was a bass amplified bass. And I sat there and taught myself these various songs. And I only had to know about 4 or 5 of them, and it all came out great. And it was wonderful. And then that led to my ex-military musical experience, wherein I formed up with another guy in San Francisco, where I went back to school to San Francisco State College. And we had this little trio, drummer, I was the bassist, and the guitarist was a fellow by the name who you would never know. His name was Tyrone Schmedling. He wound up auditioning for and playing the lead guitar for Hair in San Francisco.
Wow.
At the Orpheum Theater.
Wow.
For like 2 or 3 years. And I was already, had moved on from town, had come to work at then KTVM, now KOBI television up here. So Ty went and had the fun, and I went and learned television.
Right. Well, so that brings me to my next question. What made you move up here? Because were you wanting to be a musician, or were you studying something else?
No,
at
that
school?
was strictly, that was a means to an end. It was a financial vehicle. I enjoyed it, but I was married, and musicians are, you better really mean it.
That's true. Yeah, you have to be dedicated if you're going to really go for that occupation.
And so at any rate, no, I was training for a career in, I thought, radio sports, but I did not have in those days, the big voice was the big thing, good evening, I didn't possess that voice. So
which surprises me.
Well, I got older.
Oh.
Your voice changes as you get older. It's probably the only part of my brain that's matured.
I think you have a great voice.
Well, thank you. At any rate, I auditioned at KCRA in Sacramento and some other small place. Couldn't get hired. So I said, all right, well, let's go down a few markets. Wound up at, you're familiar with the term ADI, and I'm sure some of your listeners are. It means Area of Dominant Influence.
Right.
And in Southern Oregon, which incidentally is one of the most fantastic test markets you can have, because before satellite, no signals in, no signals out. So you had a compressed communication thing, or you could buy 2 television stations and find out whether the ad was working. back in the day. Well, I kept bugging Bill Smullen, and he was a traveling man. He was all over the place. But I'd chase him down, and I'd get him on the phone and say, I really want that job. And he finally says, okay, I want you to come up and take a tour. Well, I got on Bill's bad side right away, because he says, you're going to tour all the stations, and that would be Channel 5 in Medford, Channel 2 in Klamath Falls, Channel 3 in Eureka, and Channel 7 in Reading. These were all,
so pretty close together.
well, in a way. So at any rate, we drove to KIEM in Sacramento, in Eureka, got back in the car, rolled up the windows, and said, wow, that stinks. It's just, have you ever been down there when they were running the lumber mills and all that? No. Oh, it makes this smoke that we just had reasonable.
Oh, really?
Oh, gosh, it was like opening the plane when you got to Korea. Oh, what is that smell? Close the door.
Oh, no.
So at any rate, we made it to Reading, to Medford. Jerry Paulus, who was then the general manager of the station, I guess took one look at me and said, hey, you're on. I said, good deal.
Nice.
Went and told Smullen. Smullen said, I thought we agreed you were going to tour all the stations. Oh, God.
So you started work at KOB.
Well, I did after a big, deep breath, and Smullen said, well, I want you to tour the rest of the stations anyway, which I did. I went to Klamath Falls, and I went to Reading. And But, Paula said, I really want you to work here. And I met my good friend Tom Nelson, who's become a lifelong buddy and golfer and what have you, and several other guys, a latter-day fellow by the name of Scott Tippett, who was here when I returned in 1984, and several other people that we sort of had some artificial reunions here after a while, those of us who were still, above the divots, as we say.
But this place stuck for you. I mean, you've been here ever since, right?
Well, no. No, by no means.
Scratch that.
I was in the growth mode then, where you're trying to boost your career.
Move up that ladder.
Move up the ladder. So I kept sending out videotapes, these huge 2-inch videotapes, send them out.
I've seen a few.
Yep. And one hit in Fresno. Terribly amusing story there. Because I'd been sending these out to places, and they'd call back, thank you very much, we don't have anything right now.
And is this just a voice?
No.
A voice demo? No. This is video for you.
Yeah, it was video. I was trying to get into was video production, which I was in. But, in small market television in those days, the stories are just legendary, and particularly if you worked for Bill Smullen, because he was going to find a way to get something done. You didn't stop him. He was just that way.
I like it.
And so when color came to town, I arrived in town just as what we call the color film chain, which is, it's a giant color camera which has a mirror system in front of it, and the mirrors focus left, right, and through. So on the left you have one 16-millimeter film projector. On the other side you have another 16-millimeter film projector, and in the middle you have a 32-gang slide projector. So you have the way of showing color in both film and in slides, and these things would, what we call douse, or they had air-powered mirrors which would fly up and fly down to allow one projector to see the camera or the slide projector, what have you. It was always kind of wild because there was no preview. You better have the right slide up, and it better be right side up, and it better not have a fingerprint on it.
Oh, man.
Because when you doused to the slide, there it was.
Okay.
And everybody knew who was operating the slide chain, and they'd go, yeah, oh,
everyone knew who was in trouble if it wasn't right.
Oh, baby.
Yeah.
Well, at any rate, add one more thing. Remember Bill Smullen? Because he already dropped $80,000 in 1966.
Oh, man, that's a lot of dough.
Well, as his wife Rusty said, she walked into the room, looked at the color film chain. She looked at me and she says, I want you to take very good care of that. That's my dining room set. So at any rate, Bill decides that we're going to be first with local live color.
How cool.
Yeah.
Did it work?
Yeah. But you needed a lot of hair tonic and a fan, because there's a term which you probably are not familiar with, but it's called Kelvin, and it has to do with with tungsten temperature, light
Exactly.
temperature.
Right.
And colors change if you're using incandescent versus color.
Right.
Well, you had to use tungsten because the slide projector and the film projectors were tungsten. So if you were going to use that same camera, it had to be tungsten.
Right.
So you had to light the set with about 8 18-inch scoops, an average distance of probably 2.5 feet from the talent, all blazing away with...
No way.
You get the picture.
Yeah.
Well, and of course a fan blowing.
Sure.
Because to keep you halfway cool, my buddy Jim Morian was one of our first broadcasters up there. And he had a very nice head of hair. But, boy, you talk about Wild Root Cream Oil Charlie. I mean, you had to have it glued down or it would shoot out to the side, with these fans blowing.
Okay, so a lot of hairspray.
A lot of hair. Well, we didn't have hairspray in those days. It was tonic. So at any rate,
Hair tonic.
hair tonic, yes. Wild Root Cream Oil Tonic. Keep your hair in trim. And, well, now you're asking, well, how did you get the film camera to take the picture of the talent? Well, Bill said, we need another mirror.
Okay.
So beside the slide projector, they put another mirror which focused out to the studio and took the image of the newscaster. Well, yeah, as long as the newscaster was sitting in exactly the right position, because the film camera's not going to move.
Right.
So you can't move.
Okay.
Well, but we wanted
man.
a 2-person desk. So Bill said, okay, we're going to take both film projectors, the film camera, and the slide projector, and we're going to put them on a 12-foot, 1-inch thick metal turntable, and the whole thing's going to rotate. Well, how are we going to do that? He says, well, we'll get a motor, and we'll put a big belt around this turntable, and we'll put a rheostat on the motor, and we'll make it reversible so that we can turn the whole film chain to focus on whichever newscaster you want it on, either the newscaster or the sportscaster. And Bob Johnson was a sportscaster, and he was a great guy. But he was a little on the heavy side, a little on the ruddy side. And by the time he finished, he said he lost 5 pounds in every newscast.
Mr. Smullen sounds like you just said it. I mean, he was the guy, especially back then, he was making things happen as the world of TV was changing.
Into cable.
Yeah.
He had people going from door to door selling cable. Remember, this was when TV was free.
Exactly.
And he was saying, no, we want you to pay for it. And we'll have cable. And we'll have 2 or 3 extra channels for you. And by the time he had finished with cable, he wound up selling his operation to the Boston Globe for more than enough money to fund all of the astounding bequeathments and things that he's done in this valley, including the Smullen Center and
Right.
this and. So he's a modern day miracle.
And if you're not changing, especially in this industry, if you're not changing along with the world is changing, you're going to die. It's just
it'll just bypass you.
Mm-hmm.
It'll just bypass you. I started a company in 1989 called Information on Hold. And I'm kind of proud to say that at least in the Valley, the term info, I-N-P-H-O, which is information on phone, has almost become a Kleenex term, which is I'm kind of proud of, actually.
Well, yeah, you should be.
Well, I sold the company after about 6 years because I was a one-man band and I contracted a salivary cyst, and we managed to successfully get rid of that. But my wife looked at me and said, okay, fun's over. You're no longer the only employee of the company, who, of course, was the salesman, the producer, the copywriter, the announcer, the engineer, the this, the that, and what have you. And I, okay, fine. So she said, we're either going to find a partner or some employees. We're going to sell the company. Well, while I was thinking about it, she sold the company.
She just did it.
Which worked out very, very well, because I'm still at arm's length with them, associated with them, and they're wonderful people, and they've taken the company to other levels. But my point in the changing part of it was, when I first started this, we were making music on hold tapes, which consisted of sections of music followed by little snippets of information about the company. My company mission statement was, give the people something for their time and make them think, gee, I didn't know that.
Okay.
So rather than just peddling stuff, you would, if it were a plumbing company, did you know that we do X, which most people don't know companies do. So, and that was my goal, was to find little interesting snippets, and it worked. But the production technique was extremely interesting because in those days, you had to do everything, and there was no editing. It was all strictly one pass.
One take wonders.
One take wonders. And it was a 6-minute pass. Well, you could pre-record the voice. And you could do that till you got it right. But I would put those on reel-to-reels with little blank spots in between them. So you play the reel and you stop the reel, and you play the LP in the background, and so you're kind of jiggling and just that and the other thing, and changing cuts on the LP, all this live recording. So that was getting to be quite a contest, and actually I'd made a deal with, I think Kingsley was here then, if I'm not mistaken.
Mr. Kingsley Kelly.
Mr. Kingsley Kelly, your GM, and he very graciously, I traded him some Music on Hold product for the use of his audio studio, which was down and around the corner and in the back room.
Okay.
And just about the time he was getting tired of me being here and me being tired of imposing on him, a curious phenomena occurred. First of all, the Music on Hold company music suppliers were producing stuff on CD, which was very helpful because, of course, you can program CDs. And the other half was they'd come out with a system called a DAT, digital audio tape, which you're probably not familiar with, but they were little tiny cassettes which you could record small amounts of audio information on and then slug it with an electronic label like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you would build a company library with maybe 50 or 60 cuts on it, and you could program them to play back in this DAT machine, cut 1, cut 17, cut 14, cut 62, cut this, cut that, which was great. LTM was a client of ours when I was back before it was Knife River. I had over 120 messages for them. And they just call me up and say, well, okay, we want to change it, so let's play messages. And I would do, trot the thing out there, and it was all recorded onto a cassette. Well, that was step 2. Those were endless cassettes, loops, 6 minutes. And, of course, they were, like any other mechanical device, very subject to failure. So step 3 was the digital world, which we're seeing in front of us right now.
We are, yes.
And those were even more revolutionary for Music on Hold machines because you could put them on site, put a CD in there, it would play a 6-minute program recorded onto a chip, stop the CD, and the chip would continue to burp out this information, 6 minutes long, repeating for as long as you left it alone, unless there was a power failure, and then it would automatically reload itself.
Wow.
Oh, it was amazing. So, and that's gone even further now. It's gone to chip where we can download off a satellite. You have local news, which is plugged into these things through Music on Hold. So the technology, as you say.
It's astounding. It's, it's like magic to me.
Well, it's, and trying to keep up with it is even more magic.
So I told you I bugged your wife, Rosemary, for some dirt on you.
Of course.
She gave me some good stuff. I didn't know you were on the Ed Sullivan show.
Well, that's part of the Army Air Defense Command Choral Group story. And it was a July 4th celebration.
Okay.
And so we were commissioned by the Ed Sullivan show to perform, or the NORAD band, which was in those days, the finest symphonic military band in the world. And the musicians were, I mean, they could play for Bernstein. They could play for Toscanini. They were fantastic individuals.
Okay.
We walk in our house, we want these, we're going to sing, you know. And so they did some special arrangements, including a medley from West Side Story, which was marvelous. And so we were rehearsing all of this stuff with a piano and our little voices. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to us, the NORAD band is over in their headquarters in Ent Air Force Base, and they're rehearsing too, and they're rehearsing by section, you know, the reeds, the brass, the this, the that, the other thing. Each one of these section leaders could have been a concert conductor. Fantastic. Well, we go over there and say, okay, it's time to put it together. And so we get up on our risers and they walk into their practice hall. Major Azzolino, who can barely, he's the world's greatest promoter and the world's worst director.
Oh,
But
no.
fortunately, he had a very, very good concertmaster by the name of Loy Ebersol. And when things got difficult, Mark would go, Loy, and Loy would take over and everything would be fine. Well, the first thing that happens, which just goes ding, is this is a full dress rehearsal for the Ed Sullivan show. And Master Sergeant Bill Ballinger strides to the microphone and does the announcements, because this is a show, and so he does the announcements. Well, they open the microphone, and out comes this voice, which I've never heard since. Master Sergeant Bill Ballinger, you know. Holy Toledo! And I looked at the other guys and I said, oh, we're in the wrong building. So at any rate, we're all kind of good. And so Ebersol raises his baton, and everything's synchronized. Ballinger, the music, and everything else. And we know what our cue is. But we're all almost afraid to sing because this is so and the music coming out of that orchestra is unbelievable.
Okay, a little intimidated.
Oh, God. And a miracle occurs. Loy turns to us, and we start singing. We were good. We were really good. And the whole thing stopped at the end. And the band stood up and applauded us.
Wow.
And I went up to our leader and I said, you know, the really bad news is I don't think we can do that again. And he said, oh, no. He says, we got it.
Yeah.
And so we walked in, and this is where it gets interesting. We drive our big, hairy Silver Eagle bus down Fifth Avenue in New York City and get to the Ed Sullivan Theater. We go in there. Of course, Ed's nowhere to be found. You know, this is all pre-recorded.
Of course.
But here's the kink. We get up on our risers. They get up on their band. And Master Sergeant Bill Ballinger gets up on his little thing. And there are 4 professional voices who are going to sing front with us. John Raitt, Shirley Jones, and 2 others who I can't remember. John Raitt has laryngitis.
Oh, man.
They come to my good buddy, first tenor, Errol Vangsness. Here's a sidebar. Do you watch that movie, that series which has Kirsten Vangsness in it, where she's the crazy gal with the big glasses and she's very, oh God, well, and anyway, we saw this name on credits, called her.
Yeah.
And it turns out she was the daughter.
Okay, awesome. All right.
Well, so at any rate, Errol is a magnificent voice. He's one of the best voices of the group. And they came over with a lavalier microphone and said, you're going to sing for Mr. Raitt. Errol goes, okay, what am I going to sing? And they said, here's your script. So Errol says, don't suppose I could go over here in a corner for a minute and kind of learn. Yeah, we'll give you 10 minutes.
Oh, boy. Okay, 10 minutes.
Well, he's a musician, so this was no mean trick. Not only did he master it, but he got it off the page. So he didn't have to stand there in the middle of the choral group. Well, of course, he was going to be hidden anyway. So the show begins, and John Rait's out there, and for all the world singing to the Ed Sullivan Show, not a note. It's all coming out of Errol's voice.
Wow.
And nobody ever knew.
But the poor guy didn't get the
credit?
The credit for that, though.
Oh, he got all the credit in the world. We bought him beer until he couldn't stand up.
Nice. So that's the Ed Sullivan story.
That's the Ed Sullivan story. It was quite something. It was marvelous. I mean, it was just, you know, sometimes just really extraordinary things happen, and you have no idea it's going to happen or how it happened.
Did that make you a little emotional?
Oh, yeah.
Why? How come?
Oh, You know, I've had a storied life in a lot of ways and tried to make as many mistakes as a human being can. And, I think about all the cliffs that I didn't go off that I got so close to.
Mm-hmm.
And starting in Korea, which we won't talk about. But I'm a very lucky man.
Awesome. Well, I know there's a lot of stories that we're not even going to get to today. I think
No,
you're
no.
full of stories.
I'm afraid I wore out your machine.
Okay. Well, I do want to ask you my final three. First of which, best advice you've ever been given?
Well, I think it was a declaration from my father. Something of a reasonably fortuitous nature happened, and I can't even specify what it was.
Okay.
But he said, "You're just like me. You're going to be lucky."
Wow.
I thought, well, and I've never had cause to gainsay that, really. I've just really been lucky. I've been hired, I've been fired, I've been this, I've been that, but I seem to have been lucky because, they say when one door closes, another opens.
Mm-hmm.
And when my first wife and I went south, that was a sad portion. When I met Rosemary, it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Oh,
so,
I love that. You're the guy that always lands on his feet.
I think I'm the guy with an invisible parachute.
Okay.
Another piece of advice, I guess, I learned early on that I didn't have the Bill Bellinger voice. And one of my professors, who had a very good voice, an intelligent person, and a marvelous individual, and a great reference for me, he says, "Do what you do well." And I thought, when I started off to go and start do things that I wasn't real good at, I thought, no, wait, that's not the Quinn Millar motive. Don't do that. Do something you do well.
Do what you do well.
Yeah.
Okay. If you ever left this place, Southern Oregon, what would bring you back here? What would you miss the most?
Oh, I think the friends. The memories are wonderful, but the memories will take you can go anywhere with the memories. But as Rosemary said, now, we were in the midst of this smoke episode that we've had recently.
Boy.
I've never done so much indoor breathing in my life. And, you keep thinking, well, maybe we really need to go. And, of course, we look at each other and say, well, where would you like to go other than here? And the answer is no place, really. We're pretty happy here. We get the seasons. We have marvelous, marvelous friends. We both love golf, and we're seconds from the golf course. And we have surrounded ourselves with wonderful friends up there, wonderful friends in the media, including you and Chuck and Kingsley. And it's a wonderful place.
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, it sounds like you're doing it right, for sure. And then finally, if you were given a last meal and a last drink, what would that be, sir?
Wow, let's not rush into anything.
Right?
A meal. Well, I would imagine. I just had a slice of Jerry Evans' New York strip Sunday at the
beautiful Jayville Inn.
At the wine fete. They were serving. Platon was carving on site, and I was reminded how wonderful the Jayville Inn is.
At the Oregon Wine Experience,
yes.
They were there. Yes,
and you did such a marvelous job.
Thank you, sir.
And so did Scott. And, of course, Stan Dupree is kind of like, well, that's another episode of my life that Rosemary probably told you about.
She did. I have it on my list. We'll get to it next time.
Well, somehow I got to be an auctioneer, and I'm quite not sure how that happened or how I'm going to get out of this alive. But, and of course, for a drink, Balvenie single malt is pretty much the sip du jour, and with a wonderful Cavassier back.
Okay. All right.
I think that would probably get me to St. Peter's in condition to where he'd be willing to talk to me and I to him.
I love it.
I somehow think he probably likes Balvenie too.
I think you're pretty fantastic. Garth Harrington. If you're listening to this podcast on iTunes and you like it, please subscribe, rate, and review. It helps other people find us. We are also on Google Play. You can check out the video portion of this podcast, and I suggest you do because this one was quite lively today. Just click on features and then off script. Garth Harrington, once again, thank you, sir.
Okay, where's the erase button?